Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, before I go any further, I want to, first of all, say that we should all commend Chairman Pitts and the conference committee for the hard work, the sacrifice, and the diligence, the hours that they expended working on HB1. So, Chairman Pitts and the conference committee, thank you very much. Now, I also know that as a freshman member, I think it's often been said that it's better to be seen than heard. And while I may partially agree with that, when I saw HB1, there was no way that I could remain in my seat and remain silent with the type of budget cuts that we're about to undertake. Our constituents elected us to represent our districts by setting priorities and doing what's in the best interest of our state. We aren't here to cater to any special interest groups, and yes, that does include the Tea Party. We are here to govern and be statesmen. The 82nd legislative session has been a challenging one due to the budget crisis we find ourselves in. The challenge of working through our problems, however, has been compounded by the refusal by some members to step up to the plate and make tough decisions that are in the best interest of our state. We have had all session to deal with the crippling multi-billion-dollar budget shortfall, but instead of dealing head-on with the real financial problems of the state, we have chosen to shift the attention to divisive, hot-button, partisan issues like voter ID, sanctuary cities, the sonogram bill, and yes, the so-called tort reform, issues that have no bearing upon what Texans care about the most. As this session approaches an end, we actually have 2 days left, we are finally talking about school finance. Why wasn't this declared an emergency item? Rather than taking a hard look at the long-term solutions for our fiscal crisis, we chose instead to look at short-term solutions and gimmicks, using Band-Aids and chewing gum, along with end-run style accounting to get us through this session. We are in essence kicking the can down the road. The House version of the budget, HB1, passed earlier in the session, was hailed as a victory by many conservatives and Tea Party advocates. However, those cries of victory came to a screeching halt when the Senate adopted a version of the bill that spent $4 billion more on education over the next biennium. One important issue to keep in mind is how we ended up in this situation in the first place. An ill-designed tax swap in 2006, which reduced property taxes by replacing the franchise tax on businesses, has fallen far short on projections, creating a structural deficit that accounts for about a third of the deficit within our budget. The Legislative Budget Board, an independent nonpartisan arm of the state, predicts that the proposed House budget would result in a projected job loss of thousands of Texas jobs, including teachers and state employees. The practical reality of the House's $4 billion cut to public education is a reduction of approximately $450 per pupil in funding, which equates to roughly a $10,000 cut to each public school classroom. It ignores the 160,000 new kids who will enroll in Texas schools over the next 2 years, and I believe that's what Chairman Geiger was trying to make a point of. While the compromise with the Senate helps provide additional funds for our schools, it still does not help the state meet its obligation to adequately fund public education. The leadership continues to reiterate that we cannot use the rainy day fund, the state savings account created by a constitutional amendment in 1988 for financial situations like the present one. This is despite the fact that the same legislature appropriated all of the rainy day funds in 1991 and 2005, As of today, the fund contains upwards to $6 billion in reserves. Extreme cuts to public education pose a great threat to the future prosperity of our state. We need to make Texas school children a priority, and it is economically short-sighted to increase class sizes, fire teachers, and underfund classrooms. Education is the key to innovation, and the technology jobs of tomorrow require students with strong backgrounds in math and science to compete in the 21st century global economy. The result of drastic budget cuts, many fear, will be closure in neighborhood schools, elimination of arts and vocational programs, and the elimination of access to pre-kindergarten education for thousands of children. Currently, Texas ranks 44th out of 50 states in per pupil spending, 44th out of 50. And with this budget, we're likely to be dead last. As of today, we currently rank near the bottom in graduation rates and at the top in dropout rates. We are last in the nation in the percent of our population over the age of 25 with a high school diploma. And we have an ever-widening achievement gap. The cuts to education stand to further put our kids' future at risk, accelerate the path to failure, and will drive industry out of our state in the absence of an educated workforce. Any attempt to move forward and balance the state's budget without using the rainy day fund creates a doomsday scenario, is unrealistic, and is not representative of a government that places value on securing the future of our children. It is incumbent upon us as state legislators to move forward by tapping the state savings account and make more resources available to fund public education. The most recent revenue estimates by the comptroller predicts an additional $1.2 billion will be available to the state over the next biennium, and forecasts an additional $300 million will be available for the rainy day fund for appropriation. If we're going to do what's just and right, we must close corporate tax loopholes and make sure businesses pay their fair share. We have to uphold our statutory obligations to properly fund our state's programs and not shortchange our future opportunities for development and business growth. Finally, we must implement limited, responsible cuts to the budget, protect important priorities like public education and jobs, and avoid a deepening of this economic recession by expending more of the rainy day fund. Members, we're all here to represent our districts, and I totally wholeheartedly agree with Chairman Pitts that this is not a partisan issue. Public education is a fundamental issue. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or if you're a Republican, if you come from an urban school district or a rural school district, or you live in a suburban area. Public education is and should be our number one priority. And this budget doesn't do that because we have available funds in the rainy day to appropriate to minimize the cuts that we make to public education. One of the reasons why we're gaining 4 congressional seats is because of the explosive growth that the state of Texas has had over the last 10 years. And we are not accounting for that growth in this budget. And that is the reason why I urge you to vote no. Thank you.